Daki Chinyang Kipe Sonamki Drola Penchir Sangye Juparsho Sangye Shudam Soki Choknamba Chanchu Bardu Dakni Tyatsuchi Daki Chinyang Kipe Sonamki Drola Panchir Sangye Druparsho.
Get comfortable. Make sure you're nice and grounded. Go ahead and close your eyes. And start by inhaling and exhaling just gently, naturally, through your nose. Inhale, exhale is 1. Inhale, exhale, 2. And try to keep your focus on your breath for 10 rounds. If your mind wanders off, start back at 1. So I want you to consider what it must be like to be an enlightened being. What it must feel like to have no suffering, ultimate happiness. Whatever your understanding of enlightenment is, I want you to try to evoke a sense of trust in that possibility, in the concept of that even being true. The concept of emptiness, perhaps. You're all here for a reason tonight, looking for something. Whatever that is. Evoke that sense of what brought you here tonight. Whether it's to find truth, meaning, how to get out of suffering or samsara. Start to feel and take refuge in that concept. Putting faith in maybe that may be true. And then I want you to think of someone in your life that you know who is suffering, unhappy, dissatisfied. It can be emotional or physical. And evoke a sense of bodhicitta, which is evoke a sense of wanting to help them. Evoke the sense of really wanting to save them, if that applies to you, or at least be there to remove all the pain. If maybe you were enlightened and had the wisdom that perhaps you could even save them from all the suffering that they have. So really open your hearts and arouse bodhicitta. And then I want you to visualize and invite someone that you admire to come and sit with you right across from you. This can be a mentor, a teacher. It could be in the form of the Buddha, Jesus, your mom. Bring them in front of you in their most perfect state and invite them to sit for the duration of this meditation, pre-meditation. Look into their eyes and ask them to help you. To help your mind be perfect. And then I want you to think about 2 or 3 qualities that they have that you would love to have. Identify them and see them clearly. What are the 3 qualities that you see? praise them in your mind, and then thank them for teaching you about these qualities and showing that they can actually exist. Thank them by giving them an offering or a gift. Give them something breathtaking. Use your imagination. A warm, sunny day. Maybe it's flying in the sky. Maybe it's their favorite food. And then think of one thing that you've done in the last 24 hours that you're not so proud of. It can be a physical action or a mental thought. And share it with this person who's sitting across from you. The act of sharing it, you see that it in fact purifies your mind. And then think of something positive you've done in the last 24 hours. Something that took quite a bit of effort, perhaps. Maybe it's being patient more than usual, or an act of kindness or generosity that you recall today. And also share that with this teacher, mentor who's sitting across from you. And rejoice and celebrate fully in your progress. Take joy in your action and in yourself. And continue by asking this teacher, mentor, who's sitting across from you to continue teaching you and helping you. Ask them to stay with you. And then I want you to see this person begin to levitate and rise above your head while shrinking down to the size of a quarter. Floating above your head. And then rotating so that he or she is facing the same direction as you are. And have them rest gently on the crown of your head, where you can feel the weight of their body. Where they're going to remain for the rest of the class. close the preliminaries with a very short dedication, dedicating your efforts and your patience and your focus, maybe to the person who you thought about in the beginning of the meditation who's suffering or in pain. And then you can open your eyes when you're ready. Nice. Thank you. Not the sexiest meditation, I have to say, but it's a good one. How many of you actually do the preliminaries in your meditations? You do. Preliminaries can be done, I mean, that was a bit long. Preliminaries can be done in 10 minutes, less, or they can actually be the full. I mean, you can really expand it and spend time with the visualizations on it. It's a nice practice to have. It's very traditional in our lineage to start with the preliminaries and go into your meditation. For those of you who do the preliminaries and go into meditation, just make sure that you know what you're going to meditate on before you go into meditation. There are times where you're like, I had times where I have sat and been like, I'm gonna do my preliminary, and then I'll figure out what I'm going to meditate on, and then once I go into my meditation, I'm like, I don't really like this topic, I'm gonna switch, I'll do this one, and then it just ends up. So decide what you're gonna meditate on before you send your preliminaries. Okay, great. So we're gonna just do a quiz from class 3, which will actually be great because it's just gonna go through the definitions of valid perception, which is going to be useful for today's class. We'll just divide the group into 2, just even yourselves out. 3 short questions, no biggie. You'll be able to walk through everything pretty quickly.
The definition of valid perception. A lot of responses to this question too.
Oh, really? Oh. Talk to you.
How was the sound? Did you hear people?
Yeah.
And there was a fine. Yeah, I just kind of set up at a different way this time.
I think you put it close to here, right? Was it here?
No, I set up the onto the one that she used as a call.
Cool.
So
So
you have to be,
this is valid perception. You talked about in class 1.
that which is perceived by effective perception.
Should we interject fresh?
Non-complicated.
So I understand what's going on.
With the fresh, unerring perception.
Well, I'm saying this, yeah, according to this idea, they're talking about this exactly.
That which is perceived by. In your school, we're not.
Yeah.
Describe the general between person and validation.
Describe very generally the term person of valid perception.
Person of valid perception.
Is that the Buddha?
The true inherent state of mind. Perceiving everything. Maybe because there's bias. Yeah, and then anything that bias is normally bring what happens to it. Perception. We go through that.
Then what are you trying to establish with value perception?
Just a generally what the qualities.
Oh. Personal value perception all the time. Yeah. Is that actually one time?
Perception. Very generally meaning the term.
But I don't know if that's what. Yeah.
Well, if I look at the note from that class, they are.
Maybe the three objects. You try to
Those are the three. Oh, belief in an authority. Like, is that right? Is that right? Okay. And then based on convention. These are like three ways of understanding deductive reasoning. Sorry, belief in an authority. And then based on convention, yeah, or conventional. I wrote down based on convention. Or to have more than one of these.
Well, I think it's
Three objects.
Because we are all.
Would you like them based on convention?
Yeah.
You don't need logic.
So deductive reasoning. And this is where, yeah, this is the question where it's not about, yeah, it's subjective content. Yeah. Reality depends on who the person is, it's not. Or is it only the user side or it's not omniscient? No,
This is from last week.
that's exactly, yeah. So you're talking about the question or you have. Oh, right, the idea was that it's about.
Use like define those three objects, right?
Or not the value. It's all. Yeah, but then the question is deductive reasoning. Steps. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's all.
There's an object.
And it's like.
Okay,
That's those are the answers?
good?
Can we revise our answers as we go through
Yes.
it? Okay.
Yes. It's a tricky one. I have to say, I'm not, whatever, anyway. That last question is not as, what? We talked about it, but it was very brief. So the first question is, give the definition of valid perception. Very important. This is a hot topic, this course. It is the main topic. What's a valid perception?
That which is perceived by a fresh and unerring state of mind.
And what does that mean?
that means someone who is not under the influence of anything. I think we discussed like the five things that aren't valid
Right.
perceptions.
That's
so
right.
Like recollection, memory. That's all I got.
Recollection and memory are the same, but yes.
Yeah, okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right. So valid perception, no big deal, but basically it's your mind is unaffected. You're not under the influence of intoxicants or even afflictions, right? So jealousy can be something that creates your mind being affected, right? We talked about aspects like doubt is considered, like if you have doubt and you're going back and forth on something, you actually can't see things with a valid perception because there's too much clouding your judgment and your ability to see correctly. We talked about memory, for instance, is not a valid perception. It's it filters through by the time you actually think about it, right? And the example we had last week was color, for instance. You can't actually depict the color. You can know that it's in a certain color wheel, but not the actual color. What else did we say? There were speculation, which is a
Assumption.
hot one, like right, assumptions or speculations, where if you're speculating, right, or making assumptions, those aren't considered valid perceptions in the textbook. They're ideas that you might have. Are they valid? No, because is it a fresh perception that you're having? No, right? You might be deducing,
I was gonna ask.
but it's actually, yeah, it's actually not a, yeah,
Like
Okay,
adding
so-
to it, right?
I just opened up a can of worms. You can use a deduction. The feeling that I get from what we've learned the last class is when you have speculation or assumption, it's not really based on a deduction. It's not logic, right? It's
Example, everyone sees a jerk. Like you're assuming something that's not logical, but just something that's
right.
adding to the perception.
Right.
That's cute.
Right. The example that I think about is when Thomas, you said, you know, you're on the subway, let's say, or you don't even ride the subway now. You're on the street and someone, you know, hits up against you and you look over and you're like, what the? And you have this moment where you're making an assumption that they're just being a jerk, you know, that they're just being impolite and inconsiderate. And the fact is that maybe they're not. Maybe there's something that's an emergency that, and my always go to is someone's having a baby. But there's speculation, so that's not considered a valid perception. So anything that has to do with how do we actually know what a valid perception is, the textbook. And so because we're in a logic class, it's going to be unerring, right? Unaffected state of mind. Yes.
So just a question on that. So if the example were we hear the door outside close and we're sitting in here, so we're assuming that that means someone left. Is
Mhm.
that an assumption or is that a deductive reasoning? That's what we're
Yeah,
saying?
that's a good question. I think that to me sounds like it's more of a deduction. But I think the assumption would be you hear the door slam and you're like, wow, someone was really pissed.
So it's like attaching some sort of.
It seems that way. There's like some sort of speculation that you're attaching to it. Because when you do it, and I only say that because, and this is not something that's in the scripture, so this is just me talking from my own experience. But when you do an analytical meditation, for instance, there are moments where you're analyzing and using deductive reasoning, which some of it, I mean, you're starting to split hairs. Some of it might be speculation, but as you start to move through that deeper, I think the speculation component has a bit of other baggage that you project onto that situation.
I looked up the definition.
Great. Give it to me.
Where'd it go? Uh-oh. There it is. The forming of a theory or conjecture without firm evidence.
Right. Perfect. Okay, so that's valid perception. Good. Okay, nice. Second question. Describe very generally the meaning of the term person of valid perception. What is that?
A person who has valid perceptions.
That's the only type of perception they have?
Well, the way that we talked about it last class, there was a term that we had, seimei-keibu, which we'll talk about more today. But basically, it's someone who has, it's a person of valid perception. Generally, we talk about it in the sense of being an enlightened being. Okay. But we'll huh?
The Buddha.
The Buddha, yeah. Someone who is omniscient, an omniscient being. Right? Which is different than omnipotent. Okay. Name the 3 objects that we will be trying to establish with valid perception. Do you remember that?
Is object the right term?
Feels like it's like subject, but
We struggled with this.
We did too.
yeah, I
It was
apparently.
back to lesson.
Yeah, we
It
went
was-
back
It was
to
into that same lesson of notes.
Do you remember this phrase that we did last week?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go through it all.
Master.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Freedom.
Yes. So it's in here. So there's 3 things in here.
Nirvana, omniscience, and
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, to get them on the path to get them, right?
Yeah.
That was the answer?
That's the answer.
So it's not the logical reasoning, but we can authority.
Yeah, we should do the same thing.
We sort of hit our bets here.
Yeah. There's nirvana, omniscience, and the path. The path for traveling, the path to omniscience and enlightenment, or nirvana. What's the difference between nirvana and enlightenment?
Nirvana is state of bliss.
Isn't nirvana only for yourself?
Yeah.
And then enlightenment is for everybody
And yourself,
and yourself.
right? So the difference between nirvana and enlightenment, right, is when you are on the path of wanting to save yourself and yourself only, you reach nirvana. When you want to save yourself, when you have the motivation of wanting to save yourself as well as everyone else, that gets you enlightenment. So there's actually a different hierarchy. Yes,
I have a question about this.
yes, please go.
Because the thing that I don't understand is like, so it's 2 things. One is like, for me, in my mind, my thinking is like, why am I worried about teaching you how to swim if I can't swim? Like, I have to learn how to swim so that I can.
Yeah.
The other thing is, the way that I feel is like anything, for example, every yoga class that I go to, you're welcome to every person who comes in contact with me for the next week. Like, you are welcome because I'm a much nicer person. Do you know what I mean? It's like anything that I do for myself is returned to other people, just because me doing the thing for myself is just making me more for everyone else.
Sure.
And so I think I don't understand, like, I understand when people have the intention of like, I'm doing this because I want to save everyone, but I guess that's just not how my brain works.
Yeah.
And I think I just,
How do you start to go from, I mean, is the question, is it even, how do you go from realistically, right?
I guess because I've heard both you and Hector say that, like, Hector said this specifically in a few classes where it's like, he was like, trust me, like, you should just go for the big one.
Yeah, sure.
But
How do you do that?
yeah.
Yeah, sure, fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. You don't have to, first and foremost. Different practices, and it's not like, oh, nirvana is not that, like, reaching nirvana is not that great. I'm gonna just go for enlightenment. It's not like A school, B school type of thing. There are different schools that are very clear that it's a Hinayana path versus a Mahayana path, right? And that's not a big deal. It's not a judgment by no means. It just happens to be our practice. It's very much about going all the way. Now, in terms of how, so that's just one thing. Like, I think there's a lot of like, and I see this because it's just how society has transformed the way that we think, where we have this way of being hard on ourselves, like, and the judgments that come along with it. As far as trying to understand, how do you go from the logic, right, of if I'm gonna save someone, right, in the ocean, I have to know how to swim in the ocean first. I have to learn to swim first before I help you. Totally makes sense, right? And I get that. The thing that has helped me understand further of how do you really evoke the sense of what's called bodhicitta, is what we call it. What does bodhicitta mean? Just what is bodhi and citta?
Have the wish to be enlightened for the sake of helping others.
Yeah. It's the wish to be enlightened for the sake of all beings, right? And it's hard to go from, you can fake it. Some people will say fake it till you make it, sort of thing. That doesn't work very well for me. That's hard. And the thing that I've realized that has helped the most is, as my practice has evolved, the thing I realized is the non-dual, okay? Is that understanding that what I'm going, my pain and my suffering is ultimately no different than your pain and your suffering. It's the same. There's actually no separation between you and I. The separation has only come because I've created constructs where I'm G and this is the construct of what I am, right? And so, and you are you, and there's a separation I've created where I've decided my pain is mine and yours is yours. As your practice evolves, you could actually start to see that there is no separation between that. You and I look maybe very different, and we come from very different backgrounds and have all very different traumas, but at the core of it, our suffering is the same. And the more you can get and tap into that, the motivation is not then just yours, it's the suffering that we all universally share. Does that make sense?
I think then I don't understand how it's possible then for someone, who reaches nirvana, would they not also, I think, I don't understand how you could reach one and not reach the other, or if, assuming these things are true and we're talking about non-duality, then me saving myself is saving you.
No, because your motivation is not the same. Your motivation isn't the same. Your motivation is, I'm going to save myself so I can better help you, is still a totally legit, valid, high integrity motivation. But the subtleties of, I'm going to save myself and all of you at the same time, knowing that this is all together, it's subtle, but it's different.
And you also said that when you practice more, other people should thank you for practicing more, right? So I think you meant that because you're practicing.
That was I don't mean they should actually.
No,
I know.
But that sense of,
But your practice makes everybody around you and your world around you better.
Yeah.
And you're noticing it, which is amazing. And you're noticing that people around you are suddenly slightly different. Your interaction with them is slightly better. Nirvana is just the cessation of mental affliction. It's just the end of your suffering. You're already going the next level because you're noticing the effect it's having on other people. So it may not be in the back of your mind as I have to get you to enlightenment, but you're seeing the change in the world and you're noticing its effect on other people. And that's the difference, I think. With Nirvana, it's just this path of, I'm going to sit alone at home and study and study and study and practice, and I'm not going to put it out in the real world. It's just the fact that we're noticing this difference in the real world. That's the bodhicitta starting to rise up. And it just sort of comes naturally when you're not a monk or a nun in a cave. You see the change.
I think it's the motivation of, I need to go and do my practice today not just to serve me, but to help all of you. This is a service to everyone. You will be happier, I'll be happier, right? That's the difference versus I need to go to help myself because, and knowing that, of course, that must have a ripple effect, but it's different than knowing that what I do significantly also can impact other people. And my goal, right, my objective is not just me. I want it to be for all of us. Doesn't mean that I have to carry, it means that I have to carry my weight. But there is a sense of, we joke about it, but I do think it's true. Every time I see any type of superhero movie out there, and I see that, like the last time we talked about Wonder Woman, where I was like so blown away because it was such a wonderful feminine, when we talk about wisdom in the Buddhist tradition, it's in the feminine. And so it was such a wonderful, a wonderful portrayal of what it looks like to be a bodhisattva. Because it doesn't mean that you don't have to keep building your own skills, you have to. But the motivation is to do it for everyone else too. It's hard. It's actually quite scary, I think. And I think that to have the courage to say that you believe that you have the ability to save everybody is quite overwhelming. And it can be, and it should be, but that's what drives you to work harder. And that's what motivates you to be stronger, to be on your cushion, to practice. So that if you have those days where you don't want to help yourself because it's a shit day, you're going not for you, you're doing it because it's going to help somebody else. That's a significant difference. So it starts like that. Yes.
One of the things I think about too, like when I did this Mahayana thing, like the Nirvana versus the full enlightenment, is like it also like fast tracks you. If you can have deep in your heart this motivation, the karmic implications are just going to be bigger and faster, so that you would more quickly get to a point where you would be better and more useful to others, and you would be helping others. No? Like,
from a sutra standpoint, not necessarily. It may feel that way, but from a sutra standpoint, you could have practitioners out there that are on a Hinayana path, and they would argue differently. There's also something about what's also naturally, I think, like what naturally stimulates you and what you gravitate towards. There are different practices for different types of people. I don't think there's a right or a wrong. I think ultimately we're all looking for happiness. It's just a question. And there's arguments too. And I believe we talk about it. I feel like we talk about it in like course 13, 14, somewhere around there, where there's the logic class, maybe it's something like 13, 14. And where there's a question of if you do reach nirvana, do you just get stuck there? Can you not bump up to enlightenment? Because once you're there, you're like, oh crap, I'm so lonely. Why would I want everyone else with me? Now I can swim. Why don't I, there's been a lot of debates in the monasteries about that. And I believe we go through that in course 13. Yes.
I just had a question on what Sarah just said. So doesn't cultivating the wish to, love or remove other suffering unconditionally create the causes, create causes in terms of the state of mind, but also the ability to actually be able to do that? Aren't you creating causes?
Sure. But in terms of yeah, sure, of course.
I guess that's how I interpret it.
Yeah, but in terms of accelerating from a sutra path, no. If you're on a tantric path, that's a whole different category. Yeah.
But it's fair to say that cultivating that, it's okay if right now I feel like I just have that desire, but not the ability.
Yeah,
having that desire
and
acting on it will create the causes to actually happen.
Of course. Sure. Wait, say it one more time before
I
I
was
say.
remembering, like, Erin, you ended with like, that feels impossible, like that
Yeah,
feels like so much, and so when I think about that, I think, okay, well, if what I can work on is expanding the edges of that
Yeah.
bodhicitta to not only the people I already love, but everyone in the world,
Yeah.
even people I have an issue with,
Yeah.
that must create a cause in my heart and mind
Yeah.
to be able to actually do that in some way, to actually offer something
Yeah.
to help.
Yeah, I mean, it's also
Even though
just, yeah,
I don't know, that's what.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't create the causes, I'm gonna say and from a karmic standpoint, we'd have to kind of look into that a little bit more, but,
Like, what's the result of bodhicitta, I guess is the question.
that's a great question. Like, how do you gain bodhicitta? What are the karmic causes of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good thing for you guys to sit on. What we say in our classes, we say you should cook it. That's a great thing to sit and think about. If it's hard for you, that's something to consider. What are the causes and what are the karmic causes to create bodhicitta? Yeah. But cultivating it, I think, it's part of a practice. It is. It's just you do it in steps. You know, I don't think it for me, and it's an ongoing practice for me too. It's not like I'm like, oh, no problem, I'm here for everyone. But when I think about when I first started my practice to where I am now, and credit, like I came just from, reminder, I came in not as, I mean, I don't even think I declared that I'm a Buddhist until, I don't know, last year, you know. I even am on the fence even now. Are you Buddhist? I'm like, I don't know. I teach it, but I get weird about the titles and the implications of it. But for me, it took a long time. And so to even think that that was doable, I'm like, yeah, okay, in theory, that sounds noble, of course. But did I feel that? I don't think so. I don't think I felt it for a long time. I don't think I felt it because I don't think I even thought that I had that capacity and the courage. I think I was quite afraid. I think that accepting that idea, even when I took my bodhisattva vows, I was totally wigged out. Like, oh my God, I'm gonna fail. I'm so screwed. I'm going to hell, It was scary. And so it takes time to be able to realize that you also need to build the courage to do it because it takes an enormous, we've talked about this in course 1, it takes an enormous amount of courage to really understand what it's like to be a bodhisattva. It's not on a good day kind of thing. It's an everyday thing. It's the thing that motivates you to get out of bed. It's a thing that motivates you to get on your cushion, do your practice, to be kind, to consider other people. And you will start to see gradually how it changes because the way you start to interact with the world, And I was just having a conversation with a dear old friend of mine that I adore and love and hadn't seen him in a couple of years. And he was out of town and came in and we were having dinner and he was talking about all these things he wanted to do with his company and how he wanted to grow. And there's all this stuff happening with entrepreneurs, right? Like everyone wants to grow and scale and sell and blah, 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 and get an IPO and all that stuff. And I remember looking and I said, that's ambitious. That's great. Why do you want to do it? And he went to this whole thing about, my partners and I, like we work so hard. And, we want to spend more time with our kids and wouldn't it be nice if we could make all this money so that we don't have to worry about working, but we can spend more time with our kids and kind of went into this whole thing about the comfort of just not having to work. And I remember sitting across from him and I just felt sick to my stomach. And I just said, actually, I'm not going to tell you what I said. But it was one of those things where I started to see even how my mind has changed. Because to me it was interesting because even a couple of years ago, I would have been like, yeah, like what's your strategy and how, what are you going to do and what do you have in mind and what's your valuation in the company and how much money are you guys making? And I would go off on that. But this time I looked and I just thought, are you serious? You want to make more money so that you can just stop working and that's your motivation? Like, you guys are all doing fine. You're doing fine. Your kids are fine. They're all going to private school. Everyone's great. No one's on welfare. No one's busting their ass to get food on the table. And even just the motivation where it was just about serving him and his family made me sick. Because I just thought you put all that energy in your life to just serve yourself. How do you want to how am I supposed to have a conversation that I think is useful here? And he said, well, what else could it be? And I said, there are people out there that can consider growing and expanding their companies so that they can do more good in the world. You know, maybe it's like, hey, G, you know, my company's been really successful in 3 years. We have these other markers in another 3 years, and we want to have more impact. So we'd love to have a CSR initiative, or we'd love to find a different way where we can, you know, whatever that is. That's an interesting conversation to have, not just so you can make more money, like who the cares about you making more money? So it was fascinating. So the way that that has even changed my mindset, and I remember sitting feeling a little surprised even for myself, because I work with so many entrepreneurs and it's always about like how to drive and grow strategies and all that stuff. And so you'll start to see how it seeps in. It takes time. It's like you have to incubate it, and it takes time. So if it's not happening immediately, don't get so hung up on that. If you have the wish for it, like C4a is saying, it does start to open, you know. But there are times I think where thinking about how do you cultivate bodhicitta is great. We talk about the 6 perfections as being a part of that process and practicing that. But if you wish for it, it's the wish for it, right? Bodhicitta is the wish. It's the desire. So if you're not hitting that marker now, okay, no problem. But if you aspire for that, great. Big difference, right? Big difference. Okay, good. Okay. All right. So tonight, we're going to talk about who has pramana and how. What's pramana? We also call it sema. Valid perception, right? So pramana is the, right? And sema is the, nice. So this was in your homework or your quiz. Can you say seme kebu?
Seme kebu.
Again, seme kebu.
Seme kebu.
The reason we do the repeat in the classes, just so you know, is Tibetan was created, it was actually not a written language, and it was created because when the Buddha spoke, it was a way to be able to, it was an oral tradition, and it was created so that it can be documented. So it's considered a very holy language. Every time you say it, what we say is it plants a seed in your heart. So, and even just saying the vibrations are really important, and that's why. So seme is good or valid perception, and kebu is person, right? So the idea of a seme kebu, right, is somebody who can only speak from valid perceptions. Today in modern times, we have said that there are saints out there that are considered semus, even if they haven't reached full enlightenment. So that is possible. But what's interesting here, if you think about it, is imagine what it would be like if you could only speak from valid perceptions. Right? No speculation, no gossip. Like, how much of your time do you find yourself, even in the most subtle way, gossiping about other people or making speculations? Armando and I were just having conversations about his brother, you know, who's in this relationship that's tormented, and we're like sitting there over breakfast, like, what do you think it is? Do you think it's that or this? And you know, just the whole like it was like 20 minutes speculating, like whose fault is it? I think she's messed up. You should go to therapy. She, you know, I mean, just like, you know, I mean, and it's not out of a place of ill intent, but it's not something from a valid perception. I have no idea really what's going on. I have no valid perception. It's just speculation, right? I mean, imagine what that must be like. And so people who are seimei kebus, when they're speaking from valid perception, and if you know anyone like that out there, or have been in the presence of anyone like that out there, what does that result in? Like, what's the effect that you have when someone speaks?
It's very powerful.
That is powerful. What else?
It must be true.
It must be true. Mm-hmm. Sure, right? That they're not going to be lying. There's no speculation. There's no gray area. That's truth. We talk about, I mean, it's been said that the Dalai Lama is a seimei keibu. How do you know that? Do you think he is? How many have you ever seen him teach? Okay, next time he is in New York, you must all go. It is fantastic and wonderful to be in his presence. Unbelievable, I have to say. I've seen him in small auditoriums and large ones as well, and it's fascinating because he's in these auditoriums. The largest one I've seen, holds thousands of people, and there's no bells and whistles. There's no like special light effects or anything like that or music. He's just this man that comes out, and his ability to just create what we say a mandala, but like to be able to create this energetic force, like this. It's like this dome comes in. It's fascinating, and he's just this simple man. It's so mind blowing, and it's really something. But
there's this mundanity that gets elevated.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons I like John Stillwell when he teaches. It's not like he's got this presence when you walk into a room. Like Bill Clinton, he walks into a room and everyone just stops because he has this aura about him. And that's totally different. That's charisma.
Yeah.
The Dalai Lama, he puts on this little visor.
Yeah, because he can't see you like the lights.
So the glare goes away because he doesn't like all the lights. He just puts the visor on, and like, every time he does that, people just go.
Yeah. It's really something.
Wild.
Yeah, it really is. We'll make sure that we make an announcement for sure when he's in town again. It's very much worth it. Take a sick day, get out of work, whatever you need to do, just go. So anyone with a seimei keibu has valid perceptions. They only speak from truth. And so what we're going to talk about is how do we identify what that is, who that is, what does that look like, and what does a seimei keibu see? What is it that they see? Can you say sikyu? Again, sikyu. So sik is look and yul is object. So what they say is in the scripture is that a seimei keibu sees, a sikyu is what is the object in which a seimei keibu sees. Okay. It's what they see. And what's interesting here when we say like see or look, right, is when we talk about someone who has this ability to see, to have valid perceptions all the time, not just sometimes, all the time. Or when we talk about omniscient beings, it's not what they know, right? It's what they see. Why do you think that is?
Because if they're only having samas which are fresh, then knowing is like a recollection. Like everything you're just seeing, you're not.
Yeah.
Like everything is direct and fresh.
Yeah, it's a direct perception that you're having. Right. You're right. Yeah, exactly. So when we talk about the Buddha's knowledge, understanding, right, their perception, it's always spoken about what they see. Right? Omniscient beings can see everything simultaneously, which means past, present, future. At any given moment, at one instance, they're seeing it all at one time. What they're seeing also is your past, your present, your future, your perception, all at the same time, is what they can see.
that kind of saying you can see in fourth dimension
Sure.
versus everyone else is in third dimension.
I don't know enough about quantum physics, but that sounds fair.
So the next layer of dimension from, depth, which what we see
Yeah.
before is time, so everything's happens. They're just
Yeah.
one level up.
The thing that's interesting though is that when we talk about valid perceptions, and sometimes where we get stuck is we think there's only one valid perception, right? Like there's only one way, like one valid way to look at this cup, right? And when we talk about omniscient beings that can see everyone's perception, right, at any given point, there is no one way. Like we get stuck, and I don't know if it's like a Christian thing, I don't know what it is or where the influence is, but we always think, and I've noticed this in the other classes that we've been in, and even thinking about it in this course too, or this class, preparing for this class, there's this idea that valid perception, there's only one thing that's valid. Like when we think of valid perception, it's like one valid perception. It's not true. There are multiple valid perceptions. There's thousands of valid perceptions, right? Your valid perception of the color of this wall, you may say it's white. I know Armando's going to say that's not true. He's going to say, well, some part of it is more red in hue and other parts of it are blue, and I can see the different color patterns that are happening on the wall, right? They're all valid perceptions, but there isn't just one valid perception. All your perceptions that you have, as long as it's an unaffected mind, right, is considered valid, as long as it's fresh. Okay? Just something to remind yourself of. Can you say Jee Nepe Chu?
Jee Nepe Chu.
Again, Jee Nepe Chu.
Jee Nepe Chu.
Jee is as, Nepe is many as there are, and Chu is existing things. So there are going to be two kinds of ways of seeing. Actually, you know what we'll do? It's 8:47. Let's take a 10-minute break and then we'll pick up here. We're going to go into two kinds of ways of seeing. Okay, so stretch your legs, take a break, and then meet me back here in 10 minutes. Okay. All right, here we go. Jee Chang. So there are two kinds of ways that a Kebu sees. This one is seeing in the totality of all objects. Existing, yeah, that's like
What
the
is it? Seeing what?
seeing the totality of all objects. That's the way that Geshe Michael has expressed it. Instead of just saying all things that exist, but the totality of all things. So it's really, everything that's conventional, everything that you see. An omniscient being sees the totality of all things that exist at all times. It's one of the qualities that they have. Right? So everything that there ever was, everything that there ever will be, everything that there ever is, all that. So if this is one way of seeing, what's your hunch in the other way? Seeing what?
In the way things are. Something about like an opposite or other side.
Seeing the partiality of objects.
Oh, seeing our lack of being able to see the thing.
The absence of being able to see.
Yeah.
They can see the absence. Okay, that's good. I'm into this. Can you say Jee Tawa Chu?
Jee Chang.
Again, Jee Tawa Chu.
Jee Chang.
So it's the way things truly exist, right? Because the totality of everything is the conventional nature of everything that you see.
Oh, okay. So also okay.
This is the ultimate nature of what they see. Okay, so we're going to talk about conventional versus ultimate, our fun, most favorite subject. In yes, I have a pen on.
I don't get this.
So we have this very famous exercise that we do in this class, not this class, in this lineage, in this particular lineage. We talk about ultimate nature and conventional nature, right? So have you guys heard about this before? Have you heard of the word emptiness before? You have?
Emptiness?
Yeah, what, like something's empty? Okay. So there's something that's called the conventional nature, right? So, for instance, I've heard of the conventional nature that we're going to talk about. What's this? Pencil. It's like an old school pencil. Who even uses this anymore?
Those are my favorite.
Yeah,
You have a pencil sharpener? It looks like you do.
Yeah, we're
Electric one.
it's like such a great experience. We all have to be like a compass sharpener.
Oh my god, you're such a dork. I haven't even seen one of these in so long. Okay, so this is a pencil, right? That's what you see. If a dog were to come into the room and come over and creep over, and they see this laying down, what would they think that would be? A toy, a stick, right? Something they chew on, right? Okay. So then the question is it a pencil or is it a chew toy? It's both, right? They're both valid perceptions, right? So what that means is that the conventional nature is that it's a pencil. But if it were a pencil, that it was self-existent, is what we say, okay? If it existed from its own side, then this would be a pencil to every being that's out there. It would actually emit from itself pencil, pencil, pencil to every being. A dog would see it and be like, oh, that's a writing toy, or a writing tool, right? And so, and because we're saying that it's actually valid perception in two different ways, what we actually say is that this pencil has an empty nature. It's empty from its own side. There's an emptiness to it that you project onto it pencil. You've decided that you take this object and you've projected onto it, this is going to be a pencil. But in fact, it's empty of really pencil. It's just an object that you project and you've labeled it as pencil. So another example would be, I'm sitting in this room, G, right? How many G's are in this room?
As many people as
Right, there's 10 G's in this room. Because all of your perceptions are valid and they're different. Each one of you have a very different perception, well maybe, I don't know, but probably, of how you see me, right? From like me being like, oh, she's wearing her glasses again, maybe she woke up late, you know, why is she wearing glasses? Someone else being like, oh, I like her with glasses, and oh, she doesn't have a top knot anymore, like maybe she's doing whatever, right? You have your different perceptions that you have of me, and they're all valid. But there's no inherent one-way static of G, right? Like when I go to Asia, I'm Korean. When I go to China, every time when I'm there, the Chinese think I'm Chinese. And I tell them I'm not. And they're convinced I am. And they keep speaking to me in Chinese as if somehow it's gonna convert me and make me realize, oh, I hadn't known that I was Chinese the whole time, right? So I'm empty of my own self. You've projected onto me who you think I am based on your karmas, based on your own karmas that you've planted that are forced upon you. Karmas ripen in a certain way that allow you to start to see. You have the karma to see me a certain way. You have the karma to see this pencil a certain way, right? You see me wearing this watch, like that's a watch. Not everyone will know in the world that this is a watch. We do work, my company, we do work in the developing world. And for certain, I know girls that we work with in villages will have no idea what this is. In fact, they've never even seen an Asian, some of the places I've gone. And just seeing someone like me was totally mind-boggling. And to feel my hair was just something so foreign to them, right? So this idea that we have of what we call emptiness is that everything is actually empty. There is no inherent, there's no self-existent quality from anything that we see, whether it's this cup, whether it's a water bottle, whatever, you name it, the mic. You've projected onto it what it is for you based on your karmas. Yeah?
So nothing is self-existent.
Nothing is self-existent.
Then, going back to what we kind of quickly touched on last week about the three methods of deductive reasoning, there was like conventional.
Yes. Conventional reality and ultimate reality. We have two realities that are going on at any given time. Conventionally, yes, this is a pencil. Absolutely. Ultimately, what is it? Right? Does that make sense? Okay. There's two realities that are happening at every given time.
What about
But
when
even
we talked? Sorry. What about when we talked about the three different realities? Now we're talking about two realities.
Well, those three realities were based on what?
Valid perception.
Yeah, they're the realities of valid perception. So make sure that you're in the right category. Yeah, they're the three realities of valid perceptions that we're talking about. But the main realities that we live in at any given moment, there is always the conventional nature of things and then the ultimate nature of things. Yes.
So does Buddhism also say that I, for myself, do not have self-existence? And
Yeah.
So the way that I see myself is with a projection of what I see in myself.
That's right. Yeah. So what happens in our life is we go around creating projections that we then think are self-existent. Like, let's see. I'll think of someone else. Like, this guy's a jerk. This person's annoying. That person's beautiful. This person's artistic. That person's successful. We create these labels that we then create and think that they're self-existent. They're unchanging, unmoving. That is what it is. This is ugly. This is pretty. Whatever. And so what happens is that your entire existence, when you go out into the world, You have created these static ways of thinking how things are actually absolute when they're not at all. Because if you can start to see that there is an emptiness in all things that are experienced, including ourselves, right? And we see it all the time, right? Like, how many times have you had an idea of who you think you are, and you hear someone else's perception of who you are, and it doesn't match up, right? How many times, right? Oh, so many times. I hear stories of that all the time, and I just laugh and I chuckle and I'm like, emptiness, yeah. But that's what it is. And so there's actually practices and meditations that you can achieve where you can actually have what's called a direct perception of emptiness. You can, and that's not nirvana, and it's not enlightenment. You can do it in your lifetime, but you can actually have a state where you can see the inherent nature of what existence looks like when you're stripping away all of that projection that comes along with it. What happens when you see me and you remove all the projections and what's left? And that is a realization that you can obtain. Okay.
Is that anything or nothing to do with the concept that you were talking about earlier with valid perception?
It does have something to do with valid perception, yeah. And we're going to go into it a little bit more. So you'll see how, but it does, yeah, of course. Because now we're talking about the two different ways that a Seima Kebu can see, someone who's omniscient or someone who has the ability to have valid perception. There is the conventional way, which is the first one that we had up there, which is they are conventionally can have a valid perception, just like we said, unerring, what was it? Unerring, fresh, unaffected state of mind, right? No afflictions, no problems, not intoxicated. They can do that. Great. We can do that, I think, for the most part, on a good day, right? The second way of being able to have a way of seeing is this one up here that you're seeing, which is the ultimate way. So you can have valid perceptions both on a conventional level and an ultimate level. You can have both. Now, most of us, not all of us, I don't know who has and hasn't, but don't see on the ultimate level. We don't have the ability to have a valid perception on the ultimate level. We can probably have it on the conventional level. But someone who is a Seima Kebu can actually see it on an ultimate level. And they can actually see the conventional nature of something and the ultimate nature of something at the same time, as well as the past, the present, and the future, and everyone's perceptions all at the same time. So there are two different realities that they're having valid perceptions of. Okay. Does that make sense? That works? Okay.
Can you just say again the difference between this one and the one before?
The one before is having the totality, being able to see all things. So it's much more in the conventional sense, right?
This is just existing.
These are like, all the conventional things that we see. Because there's two realities always happening at the same time. If you went around just, let's say, being a human and had the ability to see the ultimate nature of things and the conventional, but you're always just playing in the ultimate, it might be a bit tricky to actually function in the world. You have to be able to see both to actually work. So the goal isn't to see the ultimate nature all the time and forget the conventional nature. There are conventional things that we have to deal with because it's our karma. We're humans. There are limitations that we have. It's like, oh, I'm an airplane and it's empty of itself and I can just jump out this way. Yeah, okay, you can, sure, but you will also die, probably, right? So you just balancing those two things out. Because I remember when I started learning this concept, I was so blown away. And I was like, everything is a projection coming from my mind. I'm going to walk across the street, even if the cabs are coming. And I remember telling my teacher, John Stillwell, this, and he was like, oh my God, don't do that. You're crazy. take it easy. Because I'd be like, I could just do anything, you know? And it's like, yeah, but you have the conventional nature that you need to remember. Yes. Yeah.
I don't remember the specifics of the scenario that we used, but you know the the analogy of the magician sprinkles something on the object
Yes.
and turns into something. There's
Yes.
the people who are watching the trick, and then there's someone who just walks by. So
Yeah.
are you saying that it's the magician in this case who can see both conventional and ultimate reality at the same time? No, I know that that's not speaking of these two realities, but seeing both those things,
Yeah.
right? It's that person we're
Yeah,
talking about,
yeah.
as opposed to
Sure.
the people who are
Yes.
watching, the audience as well
Yes.
as the bystander.
So like if you, for instance, you could have valid perceptions that are conventional and they're valid and you can have that. But when you actually have the direct perception of emptiness, when you go into what's called a path of seeing, in that moment, you're having a perception of your perception of emptiness, right? Just follow me here. And in that moment, what you will realize when you actually have the direct perception of emptiness is that all the valid perceptions that you've had were actually flawed. But you know that those two things existed at the same time, can exist at the same time. But you will see that relative to ultimate reality, that even your valid perception of this is a pencil and it's yellow, that perception is flawed. Yeah, in relation to ultimate reality. Yeah. But yes, you're right. You will be able to see the ultimate nature and and it is like magic almost. It's an illusion, right? We have these illusions we've created. So to be able to see the illusion, as well as the ultimate nature, is what, yes, same thing as a magician. Yeah. Yeah. So there's a question in the scripture that comes up of, does the Buddha only have valid perceptions all the time? Is it possible for them to not have a valid perception? Thoughts? Can they not have a valid perception?
I feel like once you have it, it's almost like, how can you not see that? Like if you get LASIK and like your blurry vision is clear, it's like, how can you ever, well, I mean, you could probably, your vision could go bad, but you know what I mean? It's kind of like,
How do you go back?
yeah.
But couldn't you also, like, you get LASIK and you have 20/20, but something goes in your eye and you don't see clearly and you're like, oh, but I know something's in my eye. You blink and then you're like, oh, it's clear again. Like, couldn't you, because there's still
Understand what it's like.
Yeah, like if we're all still humans and these are humans who have reached higher states, isn't it natural that like they've done all this work, but like at that moment, does it mean that they've officially used up all of their karmas? Wouldn't they then just die? Like if they're alive, they know and there's no going back, but like won't they still get a bit of dust in their eye and then blink and it's gone?
We're talking about a human who's had the direct perception of emptiness or the Buddha?
Well, was it the Buddha a human?
Oh, that's interesting.
I don't know. Sorry.
No, that's good. Yeah, okay. The Buddha has the ability to have valid perceptions at all times, but the Buddha is omniscient, right? Which means that they also have the ability, if they're seeing your perception that may not be valid, they can get a sense of what you're seeing too, because they're seeing all things happening at the same time. So although their perception is looking at things from the ultimate reality, they can get insight of understanding what it looks like when it's not the ultimate reality, based on understanding what our mindsets look like. Okay. That work?
So what's the answer?
Is it valid?
No?
Does the Buddha only have valid perceptions? I think the answer is it depends on how you decide from what point of view that valid perception is.
Well, if I have a flawed perception
Mm-hmm.
and the Buddha sees or perceives my flawed perception,
Mm-hmm.
it's a valid perception from the Buddhist standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how would someone who's eliminated all afflictions
See someone.
See other people's afflictions.
They can, I can't, but Buddha can see your afflictions.
Yeah.
So how does
That's
that
a
mean
valid
that-
perception.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's
But
fresh.
it's
you
not
know,
like, it's not like he's having an affliction that's
Right.
skewing his vision of
Yes.
your,
Yeah.
of
It's
your
not a
flawed
projection for,
perception.
so you're saying it's not a projection for him.
No, he's seeing it. It's not a projection for him. He's seeing your valid perceptions, or he's seeing your perceptions.
Yeah.
So,
See, awakened one, I would assume also means that you're having these pramanas,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and agreeing with
Yeah.
what you just
Yeah.
explained.
I'm not going to even answer this one. I'm just going to leave it. The one thing that they even go into even further is, which is just a logic thing, which I'm going to bring up because I think it's interesting, is that if the Buddha, at the moment of being able to see, right, all things at any given time, right, past, present, future, in that moment they can see all things. Is their mind then considered unchanging? Like, in that moment when you can see all things, what happens to the second moment? Because then is the second moment, it can't be a recollection, right? Or it's not considered valid. So in that moment, when they can see all things happening, does it stay static? Is it like they're just static and it's unchanging?
Well, the things
Well,
that they would be perceiving would also be changing things, so that would mean that they were seeing.
But if they know
There's no
that,
time.
But there's no concept of time.
No time.
Yeah.
The way you're framing it is from the human side, where we're thinking in linear terms, with a moment past.
right, because if they know what you're gonna be thinking in the next 10 seconds, 10 years, 10 lifetimes from now, at that given moment, they know all things. So is their mind going to change, or is it just static?
No, because
Changing in the same way that ultimate reality.
if there's freshness involved in our linear perceptions, there is none. It never goes stale.
Yeah.
What he is seeing
Yeah.
is always fresh and unerring.
Yeah. Good.
And it would be
Yeah, good.
the choice.
Yeah.
Am I going to hang out in
Yeah.
Jee's class tonight?
Right.
Nah. Yeah, I'll do that. Nah, I'm gonna go back and go to yoga first.
Right.
Like time travel.
Yeah, it's because it's a fresh perception that the Buddha is having at any given time. So it is considered changing, even though it's omniscient in all things, but every moment is considered a fresh moment that they can see.
So they're not holding it all at once?
They're not, they are and they're not. They are and they're not.
Experiencing it, not holding
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I guess what I was hearing and what you were saying, Thomas, was it's kind of like that's a state of mind that is kind of continually being chosen to be in. So as part of that, it's dynamic. It's like it's not just about the content, it's about the continued presence of being in that state of mind.
Oh,
That's
Mhm.
true.
yeah, it is. It is. I mean, same idea of the freshness and being present. It's not a static thing. Yeah. Okay. Next. I think we have, okay. Can you, this is a famous quote from the scripture. Can you say Jinpei,
Jinpei,
Longchu,
Longchu,
Trimki Day?
Jinpei,
Again, Jinpei,
Jee Chang,
Long Chu,
Long Chu,
Trim Ki Day.
Trim Ki Day.
So Jinpei is giving, Long Chu is possessions, Trim Ki is morality, Bai, and Day is happiness. Means if you give to others, you will have possessions. If you keep your morality, you will be happy. So this is speaking about karma, right? If you give to others, you'll receive more. You'll receive. If you give, you'll receive. If you keep your morality, you'll be happy. Do you think this is true? Can you use a direct perception of understanding this? Like, have you experienced this that you can, or is there like, if the Buddha said this, or if I said this, and I'm like, this is true, would you agree or not? Do you think it's true?
I don't know. I mean, it's like you kind of have to experience and test it to see if it's true. But I think the problem that I have with it is that, like, the expectation or the attachment to a future outcome if I do something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there are these statements that are in scriptures. There are statements that we hear about that are said, that are talking about this in what's called the subtle, we call it was a subtle reality. What was it? It was the obvious, the hidden, and the subtle, and the Shintu Kokir, the very hidden phenomenon. Yeah, deeply hidden phenomenon. That's what it was, right? So when we have statements like this, we're starting to be in what's considered the deeply hidden phenomenon, right? There are things where it's like, I don't know. Is it right? Is it wrong? I'm not sure. We talked about, I think it was like 2 or 3 classes ago, how culturally we've accepted getting answers of I don't know as being an acceptable answer. Like, why did that happen? Why is the sun yellow, orange, whatever color it is, right? emptiness. Why did my car get destroyed last week? Like, why did that happen? Right? Like, oh, if I had moved it this way, or if I'd come out, like, why is it that I came out at the perfect time to be able to experience that exactly at that moment? I don't know, it just happened, it just did. It's my luck. Like, we have a lot of things that, like, it's luck that we kind of cop it up to. In Tibetan Buddhism, there is no luck at play. There is also an answer to all things and a reason to all things. So this is just a beginning, kind of a precursor to go into when you hear things that are coming out of at least what appears of people of authority, especially in scripture. Don't take it for face value. There are 3 tests that you should consider to be able to see and decipher if you think it's true. Okay? Can you say Chepa Sum? Again, Chepa Sum? So Chepa Sum is 3 tests. There you go. It's basically 3 tests that you would use for anything that has to do with the deeply hidden phenomena. Anything that you can't really answer. The first one, can you say Nungsum? Gi mi nupa. Again, Nungsum. Gi mi nupa. Nungsum is direct or correct perception. Ki, mi is by not, and nupa is replaced. Which is the statement can't be disproved by any direct perception you have or have had.
direct perception the same as a valid perception?
Valid perception. It basically means that you can't devalidate it through a valid perception. You haven't experienced it directly. You haven't had a valid perception to replace it. You can't disprove it. Okay, that's the first one. Now, I will say, there are times where things have come up for myself in my practice and things I've heard or concepts I don't understand. And I'll go through this. And if there are times where I don't know yet, it doesn't maybe check off one of these three, but the idea is that whatever concept that you're looking at, all three have to be checked off. Okay, it's not one out of three. So you have an idea and you say, okay, can I prove that or can I not? You know, have I had an experience to be able to prove, have I had a valid perception that can prove that that's not true? You know, and from my own personal experience, if I'm in a situation where I don't know, I'm not sure, I shelve it. I don't say it's wrong or right. I just shelve it because at some point during my course of my practice, it will usually come back and I'll be able to readdress it. So for instance, you know, the concept of if I give, I will receive. I don't know, I just gave somebody $5 yesterday and I didn't really seem to get back anything in return, you know?
Not yet.
Not yet, right? So I shelve it. You know, if I'm kind to my mother, she'll be kind back to me. I had to wait a long time. And now I'm in a place where over me being incredibly patient, incredibly diligent, keeping my ethics and morality when it comes to my family, my world has absolutely shifted. But it's taken a decade for me. And it's an interesting practice that I like. There are certain things I just shelve and I wait. Okay. So if it's not instant, don't just discard it. You can also just, you know, you can wait and see if it comes back to you. Second one, can you say Jepa?
Jepa.
Gimi Nupa.
Gimi Nupa.
Again, Jepa.
Jepa.
Gimi Nupa.
Gimi Nupa.
So Jepa is correct reasoning. Gimi is by not, and Nupa is replaced. So the statement means that for the second one, it has to have an airtight reasoning. Okay. That's a really hard thing too. A lot of times we think we have airtight reasoning. Yes, he's a douchebag because he did all these things, and you think it's airtight. Not necessarily.
Hard in Buddhism too, though, because sometimes they think that they're like, this is so airtight, and you're like, well, if it's so airtight, why are there like debates going on forever and ever and ever about it, you know? Like, I feel like some of the things that we say in class and everything, like, I don't know, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
Because if my mind doesn't have the capacity to see that reasoning.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's fair. Mm-hmm.
I think you're always right.
But the airtight reasoning is interesting because, you know, we have examples in class that we've had, for instance, like, we've talked about this before. If I think about myself, right? If I think about by talking poorly about my colleagues will make me look better and give me a promotion, right? And you think that competition, right? Or trying to be better than other people will give me more work. Right? If I dress this way, I will probably get the job. Right? And when you start looking at logically, is that really true? It doesn't actually hold true. I mean, I've gone into meetings and I'm like, this is the power outfit. And I know that this is what it takes. And this is what it should be. And I won't get the job. And I've also gone in being like, I don't care, man, whatever, I'm over it. And I walk in and I get the job. So looking at logically of what's really, like, how do we start to look at logically even with the concepts of karma? It's fascinating to see and watch. And some of it too, you have to wait. It does take time because you're right, there's a capacity that your mind has to have as well. And it's not just on the logic, but it's also in deep meditation. You know, that's why there's all these different tools that we have. We talk about codes of ethics and the six perfections. We talk about meditation. We talk about retreats. And at the Three Jewels, we also have a lot of why we're doing yoga. Yoga wasn't part of the Three Jewels for a long time. You know, it's great that we do it. It should, of course. I mean, yoga was created so that you can meditate, ultimately, and reach enlightenment or nirvana, depending what path you're on. But what happens is that when there's a concept out there that you're still struggling with, and you go through, let's say, the first checkpoint, the first one is, did I experience it? No, I can't negate it. I don't, okay, fine. Second one, can I use logic and reasoning? So you just go through that bucket list and you eliminate if it's true or not based on those lists. The last one, can you say Nachi,
Nachi,
Mingel,
Mingel,
Nachi,
Nachi,
Mingel?
Mingel.
Nachi is before, after. Min is not. And Gel is contradict, self. I don't know why it says he, but it's basically if there's someone, whether it's a person or the scripture, but it's nothing that's ever been said before. There's no contradiction in what's been said. Why are you looking at me that way?
Because there's so many like contradictions in Buddhism, but
Yeah, it feels that way, right? Yeah. So when you start studying Buddhism, you will start to see a lot of contradictions, and even with teachers too. There'll be times where teacher will say one thing, and then you'll see them, or maybe a few months later, they'll say something else. And what Jason Kappa has said is that the deeper you study and the deeper your practice goes, when you even look at the Kangyur, the scriptural text that's 100,000 pages, that there's actually no contradiction whatsoever. So ultimately, as you deepen your practice, you will actually see that there is no contradiction. Yeah. And if you're seeing it, it just means that there's more practice to be done. Yeah. That's a hard one for me. Okay. Anything else?
Is this purposeful that that one is like the same person contradicting themselves?
Mm-hmm. Same person or a scripture that's contradicting itself? Yeah. Yes.
Question about the first one?
Yes.
First test. Just in terms of like, we were saying, you give something to somebody and you don't receive possessions,
Mhm.
maybe not yet,
Mhm.
or not instant, it's
Yeah.
not like a real-time exchange.
Yeah.
So then, in relation to like past lives and past karma coming up, I mean, you could give something, but then your car can be stolen next week.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, how do you test it?
Yeah.
If there's no timeline, there's no like set. If you do this 3 months exactly on the dot,
Yeah.
it will return.
Yeah.
Or if you got stolen, they'll say, oh, it could have been your 585th past life. It was like that. You know, so it's really open. So how do you test it?
Yeah. It's not.
I don't know how you test it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's hard to do this test then.
Well, you go through, so you have the first one, right? That's talking about looking at it and saying, are there valid perceptions that go against it, right? And like I said, if you don't know, you can shelve it. You can put it away and watch and see. You can also look at, it happens in stages. There are going to be some things where it's like, if I continue practicing a certain way, does it actually change my world? What does that look like? I've been testing something a lot with even my business. Is it possible to think holistically and implement the the laws of karma and even consider what it needs to infuse the practice of Buddhism into my business, that's highly competitive. And I mean, I was on a panel this week and there were people that were just like talking so much crap about other people. I'm like, no, don't do that. Is it possible to be successful and make money and still give and be good and virtuous and kind? And, you know, so many other businesses I see that are starting up are just ruthless. And I'm testing it and seeing, is that possible? So there are certain tests that I do for myself, just from a personal experience. There are other things too that as you have more realizations while you're on the cushion, you can actually start to see more you can see more with your karma. You can start to get a sense of it. When you have the direct perception emptiness, you actually start to see karma correlations as well. There's a whole bag of goodies that you get to experience in that moment. But that's something that and you know, it's interesting too. I have to say there are times, even for myself, like when something comes up and it doesn't feel like, where the hell did that come from? Like, why did that happen? I could usually sit, or sometimes I don't even have to, and I know that, like, something comes up in my mind and I'm like, oh man, that's what that was. That happens too. I can sit usually and have a pretty good gist. Like, it doesn't feel random. It doesn't feel like it was undeserving. I'm bummed out about it, and it's not like I'm not angry or upset or frustrated, but it makes sense. I'm like, of course that would happen to me, you know? And there's certain karmic things that I don't know. Like, I have this thing where I was actually talking to Hector about it because I went with him, and then I have this strange thing that happens where every time I go to a bathroom, any bathroom, you name it, most of the time, I always have to change the toilet paper. Like, I'm always on the last bit. It's the strangest thing. And I've noticed it. And I was out with Hector once, and I was like, okay, I'm in the bathroom. I come back and I'm like, how is that possible? And I sat with him. I'm like, do you know the karma correlation? I was like, can we talk about this? Because it drives me crazy. Like, whether it's my home, it's a public bathroom, I'm in an office, you name it. I have this strange karma. I don't know. And I'm like, where is it happening where I'm always having to change toilet paper, you know? And it's always that moment where it's like I'm taking the last bit. So it's like, and I actually, it's been a funny thing. And so there are things where I'm like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. It sounds silly. It drives me crazy, actually. And Hector and I were talking about different mechanisms. Like, I should, you know, he's like, well, let me go back into the bathroom and see what you did. And so he went in and he examined how I installed the toilet paper. And he's like, first of all, it needs to fall forward, not backwards. And I'm like, really? Is that a thing? And he goes, and maybe you should like make it really nice and put a triangle like a hotel. So I'm like, okay. So I've been testing that to see if that changes but there are things that are phenomena that are strange and you don't know that can be shelved. And I do think that as you deepen your practice, you will be able to see it. And it's said in the scriptures that you will see. You can see your
thoughts
karmas.
that you're like, oh, I can see how that came about, but that's still based on your current life.
It's based on my current life.
So
yeah.
is all our karma right now based on only on?
No,
Right.
it's also past life.
Right.
And you can actually in meditations
You
can
go
go
back.
you can go back. Yeah, for
Never
sure.
thought of that.
Yeah, for sure. You can definitely do that.
You can do that before the direct perception of emptiness, right?
Yeah.
It's like a realization that comes from it.
That's just a heightened focus of your meditation. See?
To go past lives.
To see yourself in the basic.
You can have,
life.
I do know meditators and practitioners who have talked about being able to have a sensation of all of it. I don't know how much you can see of your past life, but there are certain things that I think you can get a sense of certain type of seeds that have come into your current life from a past life that you can actually see. Can you have a direct perception of that? I don't know. I've never heard of it in a scripture. I've heard of people and teachers that I know, and other meditators I know that have talked about things that they know that come from a past life or something that they've seen, and they have not had the direct perception of emptiness that I know of.
Because it would seem, since we're in the class about
Yeah.
past lives.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't like have a fresh unerring state of mind against your past life karma. But like, isn't the whole
I like the voice.
point- isn't the whole like thing that we are sitting and doing in here is chiseling away at like tons of past life karma.
Sure.
Yeah.
What do you mean chiseling away?
I mean, like,
You mean experiencing or the
I-
ripenings?
yeah, I am experiencing my past life karma, but I'm also trying to jab a stake through a mistaken view of how things arise,
Mhm.
which is karma forced on me from eons
Yes,
of experience.
That's right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's
So,
right.
like there is a certain level where you're like, if you're gonna practice anything, you would have had to accept that, like, there was a thing before. What is
A
it?
past life?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
That works.
For some reason, I had in my head that it was deep thought, but it's not. Like, what was the original thing? We were talking about, like,
But almost that,
Oh,
like,
yeah,
doing that
you-
is seeing the past
the
life.
correlations, right? Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, like, even if you can't, like, see the karmic correlation of why I
Have the father that you have.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Like, at some point, I, through logic, would accept that exists.
Sure.
And then start working on it.
Yeah,
That's
fair.
what I'm saying.
That's fair.
So,
By
like,
being able to see and be able to understand this is why I have the father I have,
yeah.
that's already understanding and believing that you do believe in a past life, right? It's like, why do I have the father that I have? I don't know. Actually, I sometimes think I do know, but anyway, yeah. But yeah, I mean, there are residuals that you're experiencing. I mean, the fact that you're in the human body that you have right now, and the fact that you were born in the parents that you have, that's your past life that came in, so that you brought it. That wasn't your current life, right? That's past life that got you into that portal. You chose your parents, and in our tradition, beings choose the vessels that they go into. You chose the parents that you have, technically.
Did you choose knowing what they would be like, or did you choose just by selection?
No, I think that you choose. I don't know if it's like a catalog situation.
They end up doing this. I like that.
I like that. I do think that I don't know. I actually, but I suspect it has to do with a choice given based on your karmas. Yeah. Based on your karmas, you might have a certain set of collections that you can choose from.
Right.
Something like that. Yeah. For you to choose. Yeah. All right.
Sashi Puki Jushin Meso Tram Rira Minshin Yente Yampadi Sange Shindu Te Uwargi Roku Nandak Shingma Juparsho Idam Guru Ratnamanda Kamirtayami Gewadi Kewoku Sunam Yeshe Soksokshin Sunam Yeshe Rinjungwe Dampa Kuni Tuparsho.
Just sit for a second. We'll close with a quick visualization. Try to recall that teacher, that mentor, that being who's sitting and resting nicely on the crown of your head. Feel the weight. And I want you to visualize that being melting into your central channel, down into your heart, where it's radiating light out into the world like a diamond. Commend yourself for being in class tonight, making it a priority. Dedicate your efforts to someone you love. And for the rest of this evening, hopefully until we see each other next week, keep in mind and in your heart your teacher, your mentor, your guide, your Lama, safely resting in your heart chakra. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jee.